I said she was beautiful. The alien empress whispered, "You make me weak, human." Commander Leora Hayes had always known that diplomacy was dangerous, but nothing in her years of experience had prepared her for the moment she stepped onto the Andari flagship. The ship loomed like a city in the stars, enormous and silent, its surface glinting with strange metals that seemed almost alive. The stars outside the viewing ports looked cold and distant, but inside, the air hummed with power and authority. Leora adjusted her uniform, straightened her posture, and reminded herself that this was her job, to represent Earth, to keep humans safe, and to build trust with beings who could destroy planets with a thought if they wanted. She had been briefed extensively on the Empress Saralyn. Stories painted her as flawless, brilliant, and unapproachable, a ruler who had negotiated peace treaties and wars with equal precision. She was admired and feared in equal measure by her own people and by other species in the Andari cluster. Leora had been trained to be cautious, to speak carefully, to avoid unnecessary flattery or offense. And yet, as she stepped into the grand chamber, she felt a flutter of unease, mixed with curiosity. The room was massive, more vast than any human building she had ever seen. The walls shimmered with colors that shifted subtly, responding to light or perhaps to the presence of those within. The floor was smooth, almost liquid in appearance, reflecting the lights above in patterns that were hypnotic. In the center, seated on a throne that looked carved from starlight itself, was Saralyn. The Empress exuded power the moment Leora's eyes met hers. She was tall, regal, and impossible to look away from. Every movement was deliberate, every gesture controlled. Her eyes, the color of liquid silver, seemed to see through Leora, weighing her thoughts, her intentions, her very soul. Leora took a deep breath and reminded herself that she had trained for this. Every word, every action mattered. She stepped forward, careful to maintain the exact distance dictated by protocol, and bowed slightly. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice steady, "I am Commander Leora Hayes, representing the people of Earth."
"It is an honor to meet you." Saralyn inclined her head slightly, a gesture that was both acknowledgement and measurement.
Her lips curved, just barely, in a hint of a smile. "Commander Hayes," she said, her voice calm but resonant, "your presence here is noted." "Tell me, what does Earth wish from the Andari cluster?" The conversation that followed was formal and polite, as expected. They discussed trade agreements, security concerns, and the ongoing peace treaties. Leora found herself marveling at the Empress's intelligence and the sharpness of her mind. Saralyn asked questions that were precise and revealing, questions that made Leora think carefully about her answers. Every response had to be true, but also strategic. Every word had to balance honesty with diplomacy. And yet, amidst all the politics and caution, Leora noticed something unusual. When Saralyn paused, when she looked at some of the human delegations around the room, there was a subtle softness, almost imperceptible, in her expression. A flicker of curiosity, or perhaps wonder. Leora could not be sure, but it was enough to make her heart race. It was during one of these moments, when Saralyn turned slightly to examine a holographic map of human trade routes, that Leora spoke without thinking. "You're beautiful," she said softly, the words escaping before her mind could filter them. The room went silent. The other delegates froze mid-step, unsure of how to react. Protocol demanded restraint, respect, formality. Yet here was a human, speaking words that no one dared speak in centuries. Leora felt a rush of panic. She had crossed a line. She knew it. She was certain that the Empress would react with anger or dismissal. But Saralyn did not respond with anger. Her silver eyes widened just slightly, and a faint flush seemed to color her flawless features. Though whether it was embarrassment, surprise, or curiosity, Leora could not tell. Then, almost imperceptibly, Saralyn's lips curved in a private, knowing smile. "You make me weak, human," she whispered, almost to herself. The words were soft, but they reached Leora's ears clearly, and they were unlike anything Leora had ever imagined hearing from a being so powerful. Leora's mind raced. The Empress had spoken words that revealed vulnerability, an openness that no one had ever seen. It was dangerous to interpret them too closely, yet impossible not to feel the weight of their meaning. She bowed again, deeper this time, unsure of what else to say. "Pardon me, Your Majesty," she murmured, though she did not feel the need to retract her words. They had been honest. Saralyn straightened, regaining her composure with a grace that was almost supernatural. "Honesty is rare," she said. "Perhaps it is why you are here." Her voice carried authority again, but beneath it was a softness that suggested she had felt something profound in that fleeting moment. The rest of the session continued formally, but the air between them had shifted. Leora noticed it in the smallest details. The way Saralyn's gaze lingered a little longer, the subtle hesitation in her posture, the micro-expressions that suggested thoughtfulness beyond the usual diplomatic calculation. For Leora, it was both thrilling and frightening. Every step, every word, every glance had suddenly become a delicate balance between protocol and unspoken connection. When the meeting ended, Leora was escorted to her quarters. She sat for a long time, reflecting on what had happened. The Empress's whispered words echoed in her mind. They were not mere flattery, nor were they a challenge. They were real, human words, coming from a being who had been taught to suppress every personal feeling for the sake of power. Leora felt the strange weight of responsibility, knowing that any further interaction would have to be handled with care. Later, as she prepared for the evening debrief with her crew, Leora found herself thinking not about the maps, the treaties, or the political implications, but about Saralyn, about the way the Empress had looked at her, the quiet vulnerability behind the silver eyes, and the fleeting, impossible intimacy of a whispered confession. She realized that this mission, meant to be purely diplomatic, had already become something more complex, something personal, something that would shape the choices she made in the days to come. Even as she reported to her superiors via secure channels, describing the formalities of the meeting and the progress of negotiations, she could not shake the private truth. The Empress was human in ways no one expected, and she, Leora, had touched that humanity, if only briefly. It was a dangerous realization, but it filled her with determination. For the first time, Leora understood that diplomacy was more than strategy. It was understanding, connection, and courage. She had stepped into a world of power and protocol, but she had also glimpsed something far rarer, the inner life of a being who ruled galaxies. That glimpse had changed everything. As she lay down to rest, staring out at the stars through the viewing port of her quarters, Leora made a silent promise to herself. She would navigate this delicate balance, honoring her duty while exploring the humanity she had seen. And she would never forget the words that had shaken the foundation of her mission. "You make me weak, human." Outside, the flagship drifted through the silent void, a city of light and power among the stars. Inside, two lives, one human, one alien, had begun a quiet, unspoken connection that would ripple through the days ahead, shaping events in ways neither could yet imagine. The following morning, Commander Leora Hayes woke to the soft hum of the flagship's engines. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the strange patterns of light that filtered through her quarters' transparent walls. The vast expanse of the Andari cluster stretched beyond the ship, like a sparkling ocean of stars. Leora took a deep breath, recalling the previous day's meeting with Empress Saralyn. Every word, every glance, every small shift in expression played repeatedly in her mind. She had expected the meeting to be tense and strictly professional. Yet something had happened, that neither protocol nor preparation could explain. Dressing carefully in her uniform, Leora reminded herself that she could not allow personal feelings to interfere with her mission. She had a duty to represent humanity, to ensure peace, and to maintain respect. Yet, the memory of the Empress's whispered words lingered. "You make me weak, human." Those words had been soft, almost private, yet they had reached her with unmistakable clarity. She was escorted to the council chamber, where the day's discussions with the Empress would continue. The room was just as grand as the day before, but now Leora noticed the subtle details she had missed initially, the patterns of light that shifted depending on the angle, the faint hum of the ship's energy core vibrating through the floor, and the way Saralyn's attendants moved with precise synchronicity, almost like living shadows. Saralyn sat on her throne, her posture regal, her silver eyes scanning the holographic displays before her. She raised a hand in acknowledgement as Leora approached. "Commander Hayes," she said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of authority.
Today we will review the human proposals regarding interstellar trade and resource sharing. I expect your full honesty. Leora nodded, her hands clasped before her.
She was trained for these discussions, but today there was a different energy in the air. Something unspoken hovered between them, a quiet tension that made each word feel heavier than usual. The meeting began formally. Leora outlined Earth's proposals, carefully explaining resource exchanges, trade routes, and scientific collaborations. Sherilyn asked sharp, precise questions, probing for weaknesses or hidden agendas. Leora responded confidently, answering each question with honesty, while keeping in mind the delicate political balance. Yet, through every technical explanation, she could feel Saralyn's gaze on her. It was not cold or critical, but curious, almost searching. After an hour of discussion, a pause occurred. Leora realized they were alone in the chamber. The attendants had retreated, and the other delegates were taking a break. Saralyn's eyes held hers with an intensity that made Leora feel both exposed and understood. She sensed that the Empress was measuring not just her words, but her character, her courage, her essence. Without thinking, Leora allowed herself a small, genuine smile.
"You are remarkable," she said softly.
Not just in power, but in presence. There's something in the way you hold yourself that commands attention, even without words. For a moment, Saralyn said nothing. Then, very slowly, she leaned forward slightly, her silver eyes narrowing in concentration. "Few humans speak with such boldness," she said, her tone quiet but edged with amusement. "You are unlike any human I have encountered. Any human." Most would tremble or stumble, afraid to speak their mind.
Leora's heart beat faster. She was aware that these words carried more than acknowledgement. They hinted at recognition, connection, perhaps even trust.
She chose her next words carefully.
"I do not wish to offend your majesty."
But I believe that honesty is the foundation of understanding, whether between individuals or entire worlds.
Saralyn studied her silently, as though weighing every possible interpretation of the sentence.
Then, with a faint sigh, she leaned back, her composure returning. "Perhaps you are right," she said. "Honesty is rare even among those who rule planets. You may have more value than I first suspected." The chamber felt charged with unspoken tension. Leora realized that this meeting, like the last, was no longer purely about politics. Something personal had begun to emerge, something neither of them could yet fully name. She remained professional, of course, but her curiosity about Saralyn deepened. The Empress's subtle reactions, the slight tilt of her head, the brief hesitation before speaking, the softening of her gaze, revealed glimpses of vulnerability. Glimpses of someone who carried the weight of an empire yet still retained traces of individuality, even humanity. Their discussion shifted to more technical matters, but Leora noticed Saralyn's attentiveness in new ways. The Empress asked questions not just for strategy, but seemingly to understand perspective, to hear human reasoning. Leora found herself enjoying the dialogue in a way she had never expected. She laughed softly at Sarlin's occasional dry humor, and for a fleeting moment, the vast power of the throne and the galaxy beyond seemed to fade, leaving only two beings trying to understand each other. After hours of negotiations, the formal council concluded. Leora was about to leave when Sarlin spoke again, her voice low and private.
You challenge me, she said, almost a whisper, in ways that I did not anticipate. Your presence makes me
Reconsider. Leora froze. Her training urged caution, but her instincts told her to respond honestly.
It is not my intention to challenge your majesty. I only seek understanding.
And to do what is best for both our peoples. The Empress's eyes softened for a brief second, and Leora caught a rare glimpse of something deeply human. Contemplation, maybe even admiration. Sarlin turned her attention back to the holographic maps, but Leora could sense that the words had weight. They hung in the air, bridging the gap between two vastly different beings, hinting at a connection neither fully understood but both felt. In the days that followed, private meetings became more frequent. Leora found herself learning not just about the Andari cluster's politics, but about Sarlin as an individual. The Empress shared small details, childhood memories, personal philosophies, her thoughts on leadership and responsibility. Leora listened with rapt attention, careful to balance curiosity with respect. Sarlin, in turn, seemed to test boundaries. She asked Leora about Earth in ways that went beyond diplomacy, about human culture, emotions, and daily life. She questioned with genuine interest, as though seeking insight into a world she could never experience firsthand. Leora realized that these conversations were building trust, a fragile bridge across species, power, and centuries of separation. One evening, during a quiet walk through the ship's observation deck, Leora and Sarlin looked out at a nebula glowing like liquid fire in the distance. The vast colors swirled in patterns that seemed almost alive. Leora broke the silence.
It's beautiful,
She said simply.
I've never seen anything like it. Saralyn remained silent for a moment, watching the swirling lights. Then, softly, she said, "Beauty exists in many forms."
I have spent lifetimes seeking it in control, in strategy, in power. Yet perhaps I overlooked the simple wonders, like this. Her voice carried a note of wistfulness, a vulnerability that Leora had never expected to hear. For Leora, that moment became unforgettable. She realized that the Empress was not just a ruler of galaxies, but a being capable of wonder, capable of feeling, capable of connection. And she understood that her own presence, her own words, could reach beyond formalities, to touch something real. Yet, amid the growing closeness, danger remained. Diplomacy was never simple, and Leora knew that a misstep could undo everything. She reminded herself constantly to remain vigilant, to honor her mission, to tread carefully. Even so, she could not ignore the pull between them, a tension that was at once thrilling, frightening, and undeniably real. As the days passed, Leora began to notice small, subtle changes in Sarlin. The Empress's eyes lingered slightly longer when speaking to her. There were micro-expressions of curiosity, fleeting smiles, and moments of shared understanding that seemed almost imperceptible to anyone else. Leora felt the rare and fragile thrill of being seen, not as a diplomat, not as a human representative, but as a person. One evening, after another long day of negotiations, Sarlin spoke privately.
"You are bold, Commander Hayes," she said.
Bold enough to say what others would not, to see beyond protocol, to notice what is real. Few humans possess such courage. Leora's heart quickened. "I do not seek courage," she replied quietly. I only seek truth and understanding. Perhaps that is why we are talking like this." The Empress regarded her in silence, as if weighing the truth of her words. Then softly, almost as if confessing a secret, she whispered, "You make me weak, human." The words struck Leora in a way nothing else had. She understood, in that instant, the gravity of their connection. It was not physical nor romantic in the way humans usually understood such things. It was deeper. It was the recognition of vulnerability, of trust, of a bridge between two worlds. Leora nodded silently, acknowledging the truth without words. That night, lying in her quarters, Leora reflected on the days that had passed. She realized that diplomacy was no longer only about policies and treaties. It was about connection, trust, courage, and understanding. And it was about navigating a relationship that could change the course of interstellar politics, and perhaps even the lives of two beings who had never imagined they could understand each other so profoundly. Days passed on the Andari flagship with a rhythm that felt both tense and fragile. Commander Leora Hayes continued her discussions with Empress Saralyn, navigating the delicate balance of diplomacy and personal connection. Yet beneath the calm surface, a storm was quietly brewing. Intelligence reports from the human delegation indicated a possible sabotage attempt on the flagship. But the details were vague: strange malfunctions in the engines, unexplained disruptions in communications, and anomalies in the ship's security systems. No one could confirm the cause, but the threat was real enough to demand immediate attention. Leora was called to a private strategy meeting with Saralyn. The Empress's chamber, usually a place of quiet authority, now felt charged with urgency. Saralyn's expression, so often composed, was sharper today, her silver eyes scanning the holographic maps that detailed the ship's systems. She did not speak immediately. Instead, she gestured for Leora to approach. "The ship is compromised," Saralyn said finally, her voice steady but firm. "I do not yet know if this is an act of human sabotage or a rival faction within my own people, but the threat is significant. Lives are at risk. Commander Hayes, I will need your insight and your courage." Leora felt the weight of those words immediately. She had trained for crises, for emergencies, for situations where human and alien lives hung in the balance. Yet something about this was different. It was not just strategy. It was responsibility, trust, and, most of all, the awareness that the Empress had chosen to confide in her.
"I understand, Your Majesty," Leora replied.
"I will do everything I can to help secure the ship and protect everyone aboard." They began reviewing the systems in detail. Leora examined the engines, the communication arrays, and the security protocols. She worked with the Andari engineers, translating their complex technology into terms she could understand, and vice versa.
It was painstaking work, each step requiring precision and attention.
At the same time, she had to maintain her awareness of Saralyn's presence, watching, questioning, learning, testing boundaries.
The Empress did not speak unnecessarily, but every glance, every subtle movement conveyed more than words ever could.
As the hours passed, Leora noticed Saralyn's usual calmness beginning to crack. The Empress paced, her mind clearly calculating multiple outcomes at once. Leora realized that beneath the surface of power, Saralyn carried the immense pressure of responsibility, not just for herself, but for the entire fleet. And yet, when their eyes met, Saralyn's expression softened for just a moment, revealing a fleeting vulnerability. "Commander," Saralyn said, stopping mid-step, "you are unlike any human I have encountered. Most would freeze in fear. Most would falter. But you," she paused, searching for words, "you see the problem and face it. That is rare." Leora felt a surge of respect and connection. She replied carefully, I do not claim to be fearless, Your Majesty. I only try to do what is necessary to protect life and find solutions. Courage is a choice, not an absence of fear. The Empress studied her silently.
Leora could almost feel the gears turning in Cerulen's mind. Then, without another word, Cerulin returned to the holographic displays, her focus sharp and unwavering. Together, they traced the anomalies through the ship's systems, identifying weaknesses, isolating potential threats, and implementing countermeasures. It was during this process that the sabotage attempt revealed itself. A small, unauthorized code had been injected into the ship's navigation system, threatening to redirect the flagship into a dangerous asteroid field.
Leora's heart raced as she realized the stakes.
One mistake could mean disaster for hundreds of lives.
Can it be stopped? Cerulin asked, her voice steady but tense.
Yes, Leora replied, her fingers flying over the controls. But it will require precise timing and coordination. One wrong move and we could lose control of the engines entirely. Cerulin nodded, and without hesitation, she moved to assist. Together, they executed a delicate sequence of maneuvers, neutralizing the code and restoring stability to the ship. The tension was palpable, each second stretching into eternity. Leora could feel her pulse in her ears, and yet, she also felt a strange sense of trust in the Empress. Despite the power Cerulin wielded, she had not hesitated to work alongside Leora, relying on her judgment and courage. After the immediate threat was neutralized, the room exhaled collectively. Engineers and officers looked exhausted but relieved. Cerulin's gaze met Leora's, and for a moment, all the formalities and titles fell away. There was only recognition, understanding, and a shared sense of survival.
You handled yourself well, Cerulin said softly, her voice quieter than usual.
Most would have panicked. You did not.
Leora felt a warmth in her chest, not from pride, but from the acknowledgement itself.
I could not have done it without you, she replied honestly. We worked as a team. The Empress gave a small nod. Perhaps that is the way of understanding, to face danger together, to rely on each other. I did not expect to feel this.
Leora understood. The words were not just about the crisis. They were about connection,
about trust, about a bond that had grown stronger through shared responsibility and life-threatening danger. In the following days, security measures were tightened, and the delegation resumed its negotiations. Yet the dynamic between Leora and Cerulin had shifted. There was a new layer of respect, trust, and understanding. Private conversations became more frequent, often touching on subjects beyond diplomacy, on culture, ethics, and even personal philosophies. One evening, while reviewing the ship's security protocols, Cerulin paused and turned to Leora.
You have changed my perspective, Commander Hayes, she said.
I have ruled with logic, strategy, and caution for centuries. Yet you remind me that there is strength in courage, honesty, and compassion.
Leora smiled softly. We all have to learn from each other, Your Majesty.
Even empresses. The Empress regarded her silently, then spoke again, her voice low and private.
You make me weak, human. Not in the sense of failure, but in the sense of possibility.
You make me see that I can feel, even in my role as a ruler.
The words struck Leora once more. They were a confession, not of romantic love, but of recognition and trust. They marked a profound shift, a deeper connection that transcended rank and species. Leora felt the gravity of the moment, but also the subtle thrill of understanding someone so powerful yet so human beneath the surface. Even as the crisis faded, new challenges emerged. Rival factions within the Andari Council began to question Cerulin's judgment, arguing that reliance on a human could endanger the empire. Rumors of the sabotage spread quietly, and political maneuvering began. Leora realized that the personal connection they shared had implications far beyond the private chamber. It could influence interstellar politics, trade negotiations, and alliances.
Yet, amidst the danger and political tension, Leora and Saralyn continued to grow closer in understanding.
They navigated each challenge with careful dialogue, mutual respect, and shared problem-solving. Each moment of collaboration strengthened the fragile bond, building a foundation of trust and recognition that neither fully understood, but both valued deeply. One quiet night, Leora wandered to the observation deck. Saralyn joined her, unannounced, standing silently beside her. Together, they watched the stars drift past the flagship. The vastness of space seemed to mirror the vastness of what had begun between them. Unspoken.
You see the universe differently than I do, Saralyn said finally, her voice soft. Your perspective is…
Enlightening. You remind me that life is not only about control and power, but about understanding, compassion, and courage. Leora nodded. And you remind me that even those who seem untouchable have fears, responsibilities, and the capacity to be changed. For a long moment, they stood together, the silence filled not with emptiness, but with recognition. It was a quiet affirmation that, despite differences in species, power, and culture, they had found a connection that was real and meaningful. The Andari flagship continued its journey through the stars, carrying with it the lessons of courage, trust, and shared responsibility. And for Leora Hayes and Empress Saralyn, the crisis had revealed something deeper than diplomacy. It had revealed the fragile and extraordinary nature of connection, the kind that could survive danger, politics, and the vastness of space itself. As the ship sailed through the galaxy, both knew that challenges lay ahead, but they also knew that they had discovered something rare. The understanding that true strength is not only in power or control, but in the courage to face uncertainty together, and the willingness to trust another being across the boundaries of worlds. The Andari flagship continued its silent journey through the stars, carrying not only the weight of an empire, but the delicate and fragile beginnings of a bond that neither human nor alien had ever experienced before. The aftermath of the sabotage crisis left the Andari flagship quieter than usual. The alarms had faded, the engineers had repaired the damaged systems, and the human Andari delegations resumed their duties. Yet, beneath the calm, a subtle tension lingered. Both Leora Hayes and Empress Saralyn knew that while the immediate danger had passed, the implications of their actions and their growing connection would continue to ripple through the ship and beyond. Leora walked through the corridors with a sense of reflection. She had spent countless hours working alongside the Empress, coordinating repairs, reviewing systems, and planning contingencies. Yet what she remembered most vividly were the quiet moments in between, the shared glances, the small smiles, the unspoken understanding that had grown between them. It was a connection that defied protocol and expectation, yet it felt entirely real. Saralyn summoned her to the throne room. The Empress was alone, seated with a posture of calm authority, though her eyes betrayed a trace of weariness. Leora entered, bowing as always, but Saralyn gestured for her to rise.
You have proven yourself indispensable, Commander Hayes, Saralyn said, her voice even and measured. Not only in crisis, but in understanding.
You see the world differently, and it has challenged me to reconsider my own perspective.
That is no small thing for someone who has ruled for centuries.
Leora nodded, feeling a warmth she could not fully describe. I only sought to do my duty, Your Majesty.
But I am grateful that you allowed me to be involved, not just in the work, but in understanding your thoughts and your perspective. The Empress leaned forward slightly, her silver eyes meeting Leora's with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. You have brought something unexpected to this ship. Courage, insight, honesty, even empathy. Qualities I have long respected, but seldom encountered in a human. She paused, her gaze softening. And perhaps I have been too rigid in my view of strength. True strength may include trust, connection, and the willingness to rely on another being.
Leora felt her chest tighten. You have shown that as well, Your Majesty.
You trusted me when this ship was in danger. You allowed me to act without hesitation. That trust saved lives. Saralyn's lips curved in a faint, private smile.
It did.
And I am grateful for your presence, your guidance, and your honesty. She paused then, in a voice almost too quiet to hear, repeated the phrase that had come to define their connection. You make me weak, human.
Leora's heart skipped a beat. It was not a declaration of love, but it was more intimate and profound than any compliment could ever be.
It was acknowledgement, vulnerability, and trust wrapped into a single statement. She nodded silently, understanding the weight behind the words without needing to respond verbally. The days that followed were filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Negotiations continued with the Andari Council, and Leora acted as a bridge between human delegates and the Empress. The respect and trust she had built with Saralyn gave her authority she had never experienced before, but she remained careful, aware that political rivals and external threats could undo the delicate balance at any moment. During one particularly long session reviewing trade agreements, Saralyn paused and regarded Leora with that same intensity she had shown during the crisis. Commander, your insight has altered the course of these discussions. Your perspective is valuable, not simply because you are human, but because you see beyond immediate gain or loss. You see potential, consequences, and the human element in every decision. Leora felt a deep sense of purpose. I am honored, Your Majesty. My goal has always been to ensure understanding and peace between our peoples. The Empress's expression softened. And you have done more than that. You have reminded me that even the strongest rulers need insight, courage, and partnership. That is a lesson I will not forget. Despite the formalities of diplomacy, a quiet companionship had grown between them. Leora found herself anticipating Saralyn's questions, enjoying their discussions about culture, ethics, and philosophy. Saralyn, in turn, seemed to seek Leora's perspective in ways that extended beyond policy. Her curiosity about Earth, about human life, about emotion, revealed a depth of character that few had glimpsed. One evening, Leora was invited to join Saralyn on the observation deck. The ship drifted through a nebula that glowed like molten jewels, painting the chamber in shifting colors. The two stood side by side, gazing outward, silent in shared awe.
You see the universe differently than I do, Saralyn said finally.
You noticed the small details, the beauty in simplicity, the connections between life and action.
I have ruled for centuries. Yet your presence reminds me of what I have often overlooked. Leora turned to her, and you remind me that even those who appear unshakable can feel, reflect, and grow. That is not weakness, it is wisdom.
The Empress inclined her head, and for a long moment they simply stood together, the stars stretching endlessly beyond them. It was a quiet affirmation that connection, trust, and understanding could exist even across the vast gulf of experience, culture, and species. As the flagship approached a major Andari trade hub, the council convened to finalize agreements. The discussions were tense, with delegates from rival factions questioning every decision, probing for errors or weaknesses. Yet, with Leora by her side, Saralyn navigated the proceedings with confidence and clarity. Their partnership, forged in both crisis and conversation, allowed them to anticipate challenges,
respond calmly, and maintain authority. At the conclusion of the council session, Saralyn dismissed the delegates. Leora remained standing beside her, exhausted but satisfied. The Empress turned to her privately, her expression softer than any public moment allowed.
You have changed more than the course of this council, Saralyn said.
You have changed me. Your honesty, courage, and perspective remind me that even rulers, even those tasked with immense responsibility, can grow, can learn, and can feel without losing strength. Leora felt a warmth in her chest. And you have reminded me that leadership is not just about action or strategy, but about understanding and connection.
You have shown me that even the most powerful beings can be human in ways we do not expect.
Saralyn's lips curved in a private smile. It is a rare gift to find someone who challenges and supports simultaneously. You make me reflect, human. You make me see possibility. For a moment, they simply stood together in silence, the weight of unspoken understanding between them stronger than any words could convey. It was a moment of clarity, of mutual respect, of acknowledgement that the bond they had formed was meaningful, rare, and enduring. In the quiet days that followed, the flagship sailed through the Andari cluster, its systems repaired, its alliances strengthened, and its leadership united. Leora and Saralyn continued their private discussions, exploring ideas, sharing insights, and learning from each other. Their connection, once fragile and unspoken, had matured into a quiet but profound understanding that transcended rank, species, and expectation. One evening, Leora sat in her quarters, reviewing notes from recent meetings. Saralyn appeared at the doorway, unannounced, and gestured for her to join her on the observation deck. Together they watched a distant planet glow softly in the nebula light, its surface rippling with color. You have brought balance to this ship, Saralyn said softly. Not by commanding, but by guiding, by seeing, by trusting.
And in doing so, you have reminded me that connection is not weakness, but strength. Leora nodded, feeling the depth of the words. And you have shown me that true leadership includes reflection, openness, and courage to feel.
That is a lesson I will carry forever.
The Empress turned slightly, her silver eyes meeting Leora's. You make me weak, human, she whispered once more, her tone softer than ever.
Not in failure, but in the recognition of what is possible when trust, understanding, and courage come together. Leora smiled, silently acknowledging the truth in those words. She realized that their journey had never been just about diplomacy or survival. It had been about discovering the rare and fragile beauty of connection, trust, and shared understanding across worlds. As the flagship continued its journey through the stars, Leora and Saralyn knew that challenges would continue to arise. Politics, rival factions, and unexpected crises would test them again. Yet, they also knew that the bond they had forged, through courage, honesty, and shared responsibility, was strong enough to withstand whatever came next. For Commander Leora Hayes and Empress Saralyn, the voyage was no longer simply a mission of diplomacy. It was a journey of understanding, a testament to the power of connection, and a reminder that even the most formidable leaders could be touched by trust, courage, and humanity. And in the quiet moments when the stars stretched endlessly beyond the ship, they would remember the simple, profound truth that had guided them through crisis, negotiation, and discovery. You make me weak, human. It was a whisper that carried meaning far beyond its words, a recognition of vulnerability, trust, and the rare beauty of two beings from different worlds finding understanding in one another. And as the stars drifted by, it was clear that their connection would shape not only their own lives, but the future of the worlds they represented.